I'm Kristan Sievers-Coffer. I'm from the Department of Education, and we've partnered today with the Indiana IEP Resource Center, and so we've got Matt, who's here at this moment, but other folks that are partnering with us, so we appreciate their help. We have a lot of papers on the table for you today, so sorry about that. We have, I think, in the end, we'll have 9 presentations today, so 8 out of the 9 PowerPoints are out there. And I also wanted to mention that I put an InSource brochure, if you'd like to look at that. So this time we don't have someone from InSource here presenting, but we have in the past. And so InSource is our parent advocacy group, and they are great to help parents navigate the special ed world, but they're also great for schools too. And they're very helpful, I think, on both ends. They're great mediators in a way too, and they help everybody understand and try and do the best thing for what the kids need. And so please keep them in mind. There are different regional people throughout the whole state that might be able to help you out. So we just want to remind you that a charter school is a public school, so anything that the regular public schools have to do, charter schools have to do, especially with special ed too. We don't look at it differently. So everybody is monitored and everything has to happen the same in a traditional public school and a charter school. And Tracy will talk a little bit more about those. And so we have 17 federal indicators that the federal government monitors us on, and then we monitor you guys on some of those. Some of them are compliance indicators and some of them are results indicators. And so I'm on there first. I monitor indicators 4, 9, and 10, which are for disproportionality. Becky Reed monitors 5, which is LRE, and 11, some timelines, and I'll show you what those are in a minute. Chris Furby, she does some preschool and some surveys, and then Steve out there does transition IEPs. So we use this data, again, that the feds look at that, and then they will give us hold on, let me go ahead. They give us a determination. So we monitor you, are you compliant or not compliant on different indicators. They monitor us and we get overall ratings. So for our second year in a row, we're meets requirements, so we want to be that. So we're one of the green states on there. So you can kind of see how states fall with meets requirement at green, needs assistance at yellow, or needs intervention with red. So we're really proud that things have been working out very well the last couple of years for us. So because of that and because of how we are monitored, we monitor you, so there could be a chance that we would come for an on-site visit. We have you do a self-assessment or a root cause analysis. We look at files often, or we do desk audits. There are complaints and due process that is looked at, corrective action plans. So you may know of some of these things. Some of them might have happened at your schools, maybe not yet, depending on how many years your school has been open. But they're not always a negative thing. We have to come in and take a peek, and then from those, again, you can always say, oh, well, we should do this a little differently or this a little bit better, but it helps you be better. And so some things are monitored every single year. So my indicators, I look at every school, all 300, or every district, so you guys are, even if you're one school, you're a district too. So all 300 and some, I look at every year for my disproportionality. But for Steve, for example, with transition, every third year you're in his bucket, so we say. And so some of them you only do once every 3 years, some of them you do every year. So the first indicator is the graduation indicator. So we need to see what % of kids with IEPs are graduating with a regular diploma. And this one's a results one, so we're not coming and doing compliance on it, but we want to know, the federal government wants to know, are kids graduating? And are they getting that diploma, as opposed to certificate of completion? And then in the opposite, who is dropping out that has an IEP? And again, it's a result, so they're just looking at our numbers. With testing, this is a results. We just look to see who is meeting their AYPs and AMOs, who is participating in a statewide assessment such as I-STEP that has an IEP, who is using accommodations with testing, who is taking, let's say, the I-STAR, for example, and getting a certificate of completion. So these are mine, where we look at suspension and expulsion rates. So for A, you compare your rates against the state rate for kids that are out of school suspended greater than 10 days. And then for B, you're going to look at those kids compared to your own self. So for example, you would take Hispanic students that are suspended or expelled for more than 10 days compared to all the other races, and then they're African Americans against all their other races, the whites against all the other races, and so that one you compare to yourself. Indicator 5, least restrictive environment, that was going to be discussed tomorrow about where kids are sitting and do you have the continuum of services, and that is a little different for charter schools because you're usually just one school as opposed to a district, but there still needs to be a continuum of services if you have a student that needs more life skills types of classes or students that can be in the gen ed setting, and so based on what the student needs and not, oh, we don't have a teacher for that. So it's something that we'll talk about a little bit more tomorrow. And then we have some preschool, and I don't know if we have any charters that have preschools yet, but we have a couple of indicators that we look at for preschool. We also ask that every year a parent fills out a survey and says how things are going. We've got that information, and then we can give it back to you as well as we report it to the federal government. 9 and 10 are, again, disproportionality ones that I do, and so our certain groups of kids being reported as, so do you have more, I'll just use Hispanic again, Hispanic kids in special ed versus white kids versus African American students, and then we take it even a step further with indicator 10, do you have more white kids with autism than any other student with autism, or do you have more African American students with a cognitive disability than any other race? And so we look at those, and you are compared to yourself with both of those instead of against a state rate. And then are you making sure that with child fine that everybody is evaluated within the 50-day timeline? And then kids transitioning from Part C, preschool, into school age, or I'm sorry, when you're before you're age 3 into special education. And then Steve's with the secondary transition. So when you have an IEP and you turn 14 or you're in the 9th grade, you have to look at that IEP a little differently. You have to think about how they're going to transition when they finish school, whether it is with a diploma or a certificate of completion. And so there are certain parts of that IEP that are looked at a little, they're added on to what you would have done with an IEP for a student younger than 14. And then what happens to the students when they leave? So whether they graduate or they have a certificate, where do they go after? We want to keep track of what's happening afterwards, their post-school outcomes. And then with due process, looking at resolution and mediation. And then in the end, we have something that's somewhat new in the last couple of years, the State Systemic Improvement Plan, or we call it the SSIP. Every state has an SSIP. And so you decide in your state what goal, what do you want to look at to make this, have results, what can be worked on. So we chose reading, for example. Some other states chose math. Other states chose transitioning and diplomas. And so whatever each state wants to do. We have a stakeholder group that helps us talk through. So teachers, educators, special directors, principals. We have lots of different people that are in our stakeholder group. So right now, we call our SIMR, our State Identified Measurable Result, because everything has to have an acronym in special ed, is that Indiana will increase reading proficiency achievement on Indiana's iRead 3 assessment by 0.5% each year for 3rd grade students with disabilities eligible for free and reduced lunch attending elementary schools within the State Development Network. So it's very specific. We have a group of schools or districts that are in the State Development Network, or the SDN, and they are Title I schools that have quite a few D&F schools, focus and priority schools. So we want to work with those schools on reading, and then eventually as we work, we have 2 pilot schools right now, or 2 pilot districts, and then eventually as it grows in the next couple years, it'll get out to other districts and across the state.